My name's Tom Beck. I'm from Culberson, Montana. I'm a landowner in what's called the Dane Valley community, northeast of Culberson. As the agriculture in this area come out of the drought in the 1930s, strip cropping was figured out as a way to control wind erosion. So back in the day, this ground was in strips. It worked really good for controlling the wind erosion. It's highly inefficient as a moisture conservation, crop fallow period being 24 months, but we only grow a crop for 90 to 100 days. So basically, as far as moisture utilization, 15 to 20% maybe. So over time, the moisture load in the soil builds up.
So a saline seep generally occurs when there's an area called the recharge that is above an area called the discharge, and the recharge area is where water infiltrates in the soil and usually goes down to an impermeable layer, and when it hits that impermeable layer, it moves down slope generally, and it pokes out on the hill when the soil profile gets full of water. So generally, the discharge is where your water actually pours out of the hill from filling up that soil profile and moving down the hill.
My name is Floyd Johnson. I live in, the address is Floyd, Montana. I've lived here going on almost 80 years. Probably in the early 90s, I took over a farm, bought a farm. I originally had rented it from an individual, and that particular ground, some of that was starting to show symptoms of the saline problem then. And when the NRCS got involved with the Salinity Association, then they came with the programs that they started addressing them issues.
Saline seeps are common up here because our soil profiles are generally have a high content of salt. And so what happens when we get excess water that the crops and that cropping system can't use, the water percolates through that soil, hits that impermeable layer, and the salts within that are dissolved and carried with the water down to the discharge area. They leak out, that water evaporates and leaves the salt on top. When that salt accumulates on top, that's when you get plants that don't grow as well as they should because they're salt impacted.
Alfalfa is the primary tool to dry down a saline seep recharge area and discharge area. The reason for the alfalfa, it's a perennial crop. It starts early in the spring. It lasts into the fall a ways. It roots very deep, and it takes a lot of water. So to control it, Montana Salinity Control out of Conrad comes and we look the area over. We drill a series of these little wells, probably 25 feet deep. And once the wells stabilize, you survey the water level in them, and we kind of get an idea of where the water's coming from. In this case, the water's coming from right up there. Twice a year, I measure these wells with a little tape and send those into Salinity Control. They track them.
When the water table down here starts to rise again, which we'll be monitoring by the monitoring wells, if it seems like the water table is coming up and needs to be addressed again, then those acres can go back to a perennial vegetation to use up the extra water that's in the cycle that's built up over time.
You have to plant the perennial vegetation upslope in the recharge area where the water's coming from. The discharge area, where the weed patch and the white spots and that, those are what get people excited, but that's the symptom. The problem is upslope. And a lot of times it's up on the neighbor. And that's why this group project was so effective, that everybody perceived the problem.
That's a definite plus if you have your neighbors involved in it, because like you say, the recharge area is probably on their property, and you don't have any control over their land.
In 2 years' time, we could see the improvement. I mean, the real problem spots were diminishing rapidly. There were some places on the far side of the stream that you really had to be careful with the equipment. I mean, that within 3 years' time, you didn't have to worry quite so much. We weren't getting stuck there anymore. So, I mean, it can be rapid.
For saline seeps, NRCS can come out and check out your land. We can walk over the property with you, look at the species that are out there, try to figure out what you have going on. We can look at the soil that's there. We can also do an electrical conductivity test of your soil to figure out, like on the salinity spectrum, where you're at, if you're just barely saline or if you're pretty high saline content. Farmers and ranchers are great stewards of the land. And in this typical scenario, in this setting, these producers voluntarily took their land out of annually cropping production and planted it to a grass that they can utilize, but that will help this saline seep not just grow and grow and grow over time, and that land will still be sustainable and usable for future generations.